Good morning, everybody. How are you all? Hope everybody is well. Coming to you from Dubai with this webinar for pre-primary and primary teachers. If you can hear me, please let me know that all is loud and clear. Hi, Ola. There you are. Is the sound okay? Is it too loud, too quiet? Perfect. As you can see, I'm currently hidden from view, but I'm about to join you. Here I am. Let's move our friends. Introduce you. This is Mimi. Hopefully you've seen them before. And you can sit here. This is Ellie. And we have Leo as well. These guys will be joining us throughout, I'm sure. Let's put him here. Let's see, am I a good distance? Hope so. Maybe a bit too far away. A little closer. And I also need to be able to see the comments. All right, perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Let's save this actually. So today's back to school webinar on everything puppet-wise. I hope you're excited. I'm excited for this one. It's going to be engaging, hopefully, lots of practical tips, lots of stuff around motivation, engagement, being attacked. Good afternoon. So let me know where you're joining us from. Be good to see everybody. Where are you coming from? Everybody should probably be in Mena, I would have thought. Probably people in Egypt, Jordan. Yeah, excellent. Reem, good afternoon. Egypt, Rania, nice to see you. Qatar, lots of people from Qatar. Excellent. Okay, good. So it's 3 o'clock. So let's get started. Some people are already in. Yeah, 30. So that's perfect. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me by now, my name is Nathan Waller, and I'm the teacher trainer for Macmillan Education in the MENA region, in the Middle East and North Africa region. I'm sure a lot of you have seen me before. I've done plenty of webinars, and the names I can see in the chat box, I'm pretty familiar with most of you by now, which is great. So we've got an hour, let's say between 60 and 90 minutes. Going to try and make this as interactive as possible, as workshop-based as possible. We don't really have breakout rooms in this platform, but we will try and do some questions and get you guys discussing your opinions and the kinds of things that you do. So I hope that's okay. I hope you're all there. If you're on your phone, you can type. If you are on your laptop, you can add some comments as well. A lot more people coming in. Good. Okay, this is the first session I'm doing in the Back to School series. So I want to check in with you all. It's been a while since I've seen most of you. If some of you came to the Fast Forward event, you probably saw me, but it wasn't very interactional. So the last time I did something webinar-wise, it's been a while. And it's also coming up to Back to School. So I want to check in with everybody. How are you doing? Are you okay? Are you anxious about back to school? Are you nervous about back to school? Are you excited about back to school? As you know, this is part of our back to school series, and we've got a whole series of events, some of us done by us in MENA, and some of them are going to be done by the UK, but there's a whole variety of things. And we kick-started last week with a session on well-being. So we do want to check in with you. We do want to know how you're doing. Please let us know. I hope everybody is doing okay. But this year's back to school is going to be a lot different from last year's back to school, especially if you're in somewhere like Egypt, because I heard it's not even going to start until October. So back to school probably seems like quite a long way away for students anyway. But please let us know how you are doing. We want to hear about it. Also, what about your students? How do they feel about back to school? How do they feel about the new academic year? Have they got a different mindset? Is something different for them this year? Parents, what kind of communications have you had with parents as well? So I will take a second Drink some tea. Give people a chance to catch up. Please let me know how you're doing. Are you okay? Even if you're just okay, let me know you're okay. A lot of the guys from Oscar Academy joining us today, which is great. Good to see you guys. Okay, so I hope that you're all well. I hope that you're all healthy, and I hope you're all looking forward to the coming academic year. We're going to look at how you guys use puppets already. So we're going to dive into your experiences. We're going to draw on the expertise of the people who are in the room, find out how you use them, in what ways, in what scenarios, how you use them with students or for students, this kind of thing. Then we're going to look a little bit about the advantages of puppets. So we're going to look at what the kind of research says, what the background literature says about the use of puppets with young learners. Then we're going to look at how to choose puppets and tips to use them. So we're going to look at some different areas around how we can use puppets in our teaching contexts. Lots of practical stuff there. That's going to be the kind of bulk of the session. And we've divided it up into certain sections, and we'll go through one at a time. Then we'll look at our kind of key takeaways at the end. And if anyone has any questions, we'll look at them at the end. Feel free to write questions in the chat box as we go, and I will try and keep up with them. And we can either answer them as we go, or we can address them at the end. Okay, good. Are you guys ready? Are you guys ready to get started? I'll start with a question. How many famous puppets can you name? Let's start with an opening question. Yes. Good. How many puppets do you know? Where have you seen puppets before? Start with something nice and lighthearted. Pinocchio, yeah. There was a recent movie about Pinocchio, actually, that I watched. It was a bit bizarre. A live action remake or something. Prefer the older cartoon type, I think. Any more? Think of any puppets. Where have you seen puppets? Doesn't matter if you can't think of any. I've dropped some in as images as we go through the session. So you'll see some of them popping up, some friendly, familiar faces, hopefully. Anyone else? Any puppets? Racking your brains? You gonna sleep? Yes, Elmo, Kermit the Frog. Keep your eyes open for these guys. Some of these more famous ones. So yeah, we have Kermit, we have the Muppets, we have Elmo, yep, from Sesame Street. So you have Big Bird, Bert and Ernie were always my favorite. Barney the dinosaur, yeah, he's a puppet, right? Because he's got somebody inside of him. The big purple one, you mean, right? So yeah, we've got these kind of two branches, Muppets, we've got Sesame Street. Anywhere else you've seen puppets? Could be anywhere. Cookie Monster, he's one of my favorites as well. I used to love the Cookie Monster when I was a kid. Bert and Ernie were definitely my favorites. I love Bert and Ernie. And the ones I really loved were the two old men. Does anyone remember the name of what were the two old guys called? They used to kind of sit in the top and kind of laugh at everything. I'm trying to think what they're called. Charlie McCarthy, I'll have to look him up. And Kurumba, yeah, the Egyptian one. I've seen this one, I think. Ah, you created a puppet at school called Bunzo. You'll have to send us a picture. I would look forward to seeing him, and hopefully throughout the session you can tell us what you kind of did with him. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is so these are famous ones, but we want to look at what you guys do with puppets. So we're going to start with an activity, and I'm going to give you some time for this, so you don't need to kind of frantically write in the chat box. So I've set it up on menti.com, and you've got the code. So just go to menti.com on a separate browser page, type in the code 21959463. And try and explain as much as possible. I think you've got 250 characters or 250 words, so you can write quite a bit. So take your time. I'm going to give you a few minutes to do this, but think about it. Take a moment to think. Okay, what do we do with puppets at the moment? Someone's already mentioned that they created their own puppet in school. If you don't use puppets at all, just write that as well. Just say, I don't really use puppets. And at the end of the comment, maybe put your name so that I can see who has written what. And I will do a screen share in a couple of minutes so we can see what kind of things people have started to put. So let me give you a couple of minutes just to get going with that. So how do you currently use puppets? Oh, wow, you had a puppet show about the coronavirus, which is great. So using it as a kind of advertising board, an information board. Good. So go over to Menti and write me a bit of information about what it is you've done. Yes, actually, look, Zaina, Stadler and Waldorf, it was, of course, the two old guys. They were hilarious. I love those guys. Okay, for the people who have just come in, because I've seen 20 or so people just join, we're starting with an activity. So we're looking at how you currently use puppets in your teaching and learning contexts. So go to menti.com, use that code, and a box will pop up, and you can write it. You can submit more than one. So if you do more than one things with puppets, feel free to put as many different ways as you want to. Let me go over to Menti and have a look, see what's coming up. Good, there's a few there. Anyone else? How do you use puppets? If you don't use puppets at all, just write, I don't really use puppets. And try and add your name as well, so I know who is writing what. Good, we've got a few comments in the chat box as well. So for greetings, yeah. For story time, getting the children's attention, so maybe a bit of classroom management. We've got puppet shows, excellent. What else? Give you a couple more minutes. Over on Menti, we've got using for songs. Somebody doesn't use them very much. Again, telling a story. Any other ways you use puppets? You can either write in the chat or you can write in the Menti box. Development of motor skills. Okay, good. So I'd be interested to know a bit more about how you use them for the development of motor skills. Perfect. And we've got some stuff about Bunzo here. Talk to the children about coronavirus precautions in a simple way. Okay, so relating to them, perhaps procedures, the importance of masks, this kind of thing. Martina uses them in circle time. I think that's a very popular way of using puppets. Help them express their feelings. Good, excellent. Any more? Let's say one more minute. Yep, someone over on Menti said they use them as a behavioral tool. Good. Just give you 30 more seconds in case anyone's got any other comments they would like to make. Someone else is typing. So someone else has written on Menti, they use puppets to say hi to the children. Yep, so greetings. Good. Using them as an icebreaker. Yeah, okay. Last few seconds. They love hearing the classroom rules from the puppet. Okay, good. So class management, setting routines. Good. Storytelling, we've got storytelling. Good. Keep an eye on that box. Use them in grade 3. Good. Excited? Yeah, they love them, enjoying them. Yeah, use them to reinforce phonics. Good. Okay, good. So let's move on. If you have any more ways that you currently use puppets, please feel free to put them in the chat box, and we'll see together what you've put. Now, I tried to come up with some of the more common ones that I could think of, because I wanted to see whether or not that would compare with what you guys had. I need to on this maybe. No, not going to work. Manually. The batteries went. So I tried to come up with some of the more familiar ones. So I think we've seen pretty much all of these. So people use them in classroom management ways to moderate behavior, to set routines. Somebody had that there. People can use them for greetings. So when children come into the class, the puppet will greet them, a kind of friendly, familiar face for them to interact with, which is nice. Routines like setting classroom rules. So you see a lot of people using puppets for things like, let's use one. Ellie, for example. So you would say things like, oh, does Ellie like that kind of thing? Ellie, is this good behavior that we're seeing? And then she would disagree. And then they kind of see that, somebody's written there to make an emphasis, basically, when it comes to routines. A lot of people will use them to explain things. So they can either explain it to the puppet. So you would either say, I'm giving the explanation rather than giving it straight to the student. I'm giving it in a mediation type of way. So I'm giving it to the puppet and they listen, and then you concept check with them afterwards. Some people will also do it through the puppet. So the puppet will actually be the explainer. You can do it that way as well. A lot of people will use them to demonstrate. People use them for questions quite a lot, so they'll check understanding. The puppet will ask the question to check understanding from the students. And as we've seen, a lot of people use them for stories. So the puppet will read out the story, or the puppet will be a part of the story. And a lot of people use them for songs as well. They're a really good way to introduce students to songs and get them singing along with the puppet. These are some of the more kind of common ways that I think we see people using puppets. Everybody agree with this? There was a couple of others, I think, and I think we'll be touching on them throughout this session, which is good. Okay, good. So my next question for you then is, we've thought about how you currently use puppets now, but what I want to do is we want to move this on and think about new ways, adding variety to our classroom situations, teaching and learning that's going on. So I want to pose a statement, and I'd like you guys to finish it off. So we're going to think now a little bit about the advantages of using puppets. So I want you to complete this sentence. The advantages of using puppets are, somebody already wrote about attention, so you could put that one. The advantages of using puppets are they help to grab students' attention. That could be one. What other things? What other advantages can puppets have? There's a lot. Okay, good. Allow you to get closer to the kids. Good. So breaking down that barrier, perhaps, of adult student or teacher student or adult child. Good. Someone's put about stress. Good. So diffusing stress. So we'll talk a little bit about the emotional interaction in a bit. Interest. Yeah, absolutely. Make them interested, happy in the class. Good. So adding that element of humor, adding that element of fun. Good. Making them enjoy. So the advantages of using puppets. Oh, what happened to this? It died. You finally died as well. Good. Good. They are good for varying classroom activities. So it's not always just teacher and student. You have like an extra, almost like a teaching assistant, could be. Yeah. Good. Courage to talk to the teacher, especially in the first few weeks. So they help break down that shyness sometimes. Good. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Good. So there are lots of advantages to using puppets. People are still typing, that's okay. I'm gonna have to move closer because the thing didn't work. So I'm gonna have to manually move the slides along, which is fine. Good, and all these things we're gonna be talking about throughout the session. So I tried to think of some of the advantages of puppets. We already had this one, engaging motivation. So puppets can be an engaging and useful way to help students develop emotionally and also grow their language and communication skills as well. Of course, we might not be that used to using them. Somebody mentioned in the Menti activity that they don't really use them that much. So there could be a nervousness perhaps on the part of teachers. How do I use them? Where do I use them? Do I use them too much, too little? What are all of these advantages? So let's go through more one by one. One, clearly we know that they're very engaging. So students do feel like they can engage with a puppet in a way that they might not be able to engage with a teacher. And the reason for this is power, is that students know that you're the adult. They know that you're the teacher. They know that there's certain expectations in the relationship that they have between you and them. They are a group, and you are a part of that group, but you're also external to that group. You're not one of them. A puppet allows allows students to see something else, almost like a peer. So they see the puppet in a peer-like capacity rather than an extension of the teacher. So if I'm the teacher and I have Ellie, she's with me here. Sometimes I think we see from our point of view, we see the puppet as almost as a teaching assistant. Yeah, it's something to assist us to teach the students. But the students don't necessarily see it that way. They see it as a peer. So it's almost like a peer that we control rather than a teaching assistant per se. And it allows the students to interact with us through the puppet, which again, like you said, helps to build a teacher-student relationship, but it also helps to diffuse some of that power dynamic within the classroom. So that's one way that it can be engaging for them. Also, if it's like Ellie or Leo, it's an animal, it's fun, they can be bright, they're very easy for the students to interact with. But I think students like to project their emotions onto the puppet, and they might not do that in the same way with a teacher. So for example, if a student is struggling emotionally, the puppet could comfort them in a way that the teacher cannot. Yeah, we cannot go around hugging all of our students and all of us, but the puppet can comfort them. They could pat him on the head, they can stroke him. If they're really sad because of something that's happened, you could allow them to sit with, and use the puppet for comfort. You need to use that very carefully, but it's a technique that you could use. Yeah. Another advantage of puppets is participation. So building on that, the puppet can help students who might not otherwise participate to participate because they feel more comfortable interacting with the puppet, whereas they might not with the teacher. If a teacher asks a student to stand up and asks them a question, what color is this, or how many legs can you see? They could feel nervous. Big teacher asking me a question, singling me out, making me stand up. You could, like somebody mentioned, in the first couple of weeks of school, students might not feel very comfortable with that. So, doing it through the medium of the puppet allows them to participate in ways which they might otherwise not. And also not just interacting with the puppet, but they might be able to come up and be the teacher for example, and ask their peers questions, again, through the medium of the puppet. So they don't have to think, oh, I always have to ask my best friend, because if I don't ask him, he will get upset. It allows them to change the dynamics within the group as well. So there's lots of ways the puppets can help us enable students to participate. And we've already mentioned the word mediating a lot. So it allows a lot of mediation to go on. There are a lot of dynamics going on within the classroom. It could be to do with gender. It could be to do with inclusion. It could be to do with teacher and student. So there's lots of ways that we can use the puppet to mediate some of that, some of those interactions. Someone's asked a question there, and I'm going to come to that question in a minute. So I'm going to hold that one. I'm going to time out on that one. But I will come to it because it's in one of the next slides. Another nice thing about puppets is that it allows students to see mistakes. We know that students need to make errors. They need to make mistakes. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. But again, if you have these power dynamics in the classroom, students know, they understand what's expected of them in class. So they might not be comfortable making a mistake in front of other people. And that's a difficult thing to learn and to be able to do. You know, will their peers make fun of them? Will the teacher, you know, scold them for doing something wrong? They always have that fear. And the puppet allows you to be able to model mistakes ahead of them being able to do it. So they see Ellie making mistakes a few times, and then eventually she gets the right answer, and they think, oh, if I make the mistake the first time or the second time, it's part of the process of getting to the point of being, you know, correct or knowing what it is that I need to know. Yeah. So it allows you to be able to model and show students that making mistakes are okay. And I think that's an important part, especially with pre-primary students. I'm going to leave Ellie here, actually, because I keep picking her up. That's right, there is no shame in mistakes. But sometimes students don't know that. And that message can come, we might not be sending that message. We can tell them it's fine to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. But there's other forces at play. Parents or the home environment, you know, the expectation of success, and also, you know, the wider school community, peers watching you, people seeing what you're doing. Students know who's weaker and stronger, you know, and that plays a big part in their life at school and how they feel. So from a teacher's point of view, I totally agree with you. Most people would say it's absolutely fine to make mistakes. But from the position of the student, they don't always feel like that, I don't think. It allows them to develop emotional relationships. So we're going to talk a lot about social and emotional learning in a little bit. So we'll come back to this one. But there's loads of scope to develop emotional relationships. How does Ellie feel about this? You know, all these kinds of things. Ellie asking about how they feel, asking about how they think somebody else feels. So you can bring all those things in, empathy, feelings, these kinds of things. We'll look at some of that in a bit. Yeah, the puppet is their friend. They see it as a part of their group. It gives you almost like an insider, a secret insider in their young learner group. And you can learn a lot from that as well. One of the things the puppets do allow them to do is it allows them to go to this place of play. And we know for young learners, whether it's pre-primary or even primary students, the play is where they learn. It's how they learn. There's so much research around play-based learning, you know, and the importance of it, collaboration, interacting, experimenting, finding things out, and the puppet can allow you to do all of those things with them. And it can be fun. Yeah, you can introduce humor. So if you're the kind of teacher that, you know, wants to kind of, or it feels like, okay, I need to control my class and we need to be doing this kind of thing. I want to put them in groups. You know, I need to manage things. If I make it too humorous, if I make it too fun, I worry that I'm going to lose control of the group. Things are going to get out of hand. It allows you to have that space. So the puppet can have fun, the puppet can make jokes, make them laugh. And as a teacher, then you can kind of bring them back into you know, another space. So like somebody said before, you can have variety and allow you to be able to moderate that behavior, mediate that behavior through an external force. And also we need to obviously talk about inclusion. So puppets are used in speech and language therapy. They're used in special educational needs schools a lot. They allow lots of opportunities for inclusion. And I've got a section on inclusion, so we're going to talk about this one at the end. But I wanted to bring it up here in the advantages. Okay, good. If you can think of any other advantages to puppets, I think I touched on some. Let's have a look quickly through the chat box. Good. We had something about confidence, variation, enjoyment, interest. I think we've talked about these, getting attention. Good. Okay, there's a really good question there about when to introduce it, which I think is in the next slide. So let's look at using puppets. So how to choose, when to use, and some tips around lots of different ways we might be able to use them. So let's think first of all about choosing your puppets. Now, a lot of people will probably think, well, it doesn't matter. I will just choose any. Yeah, this one looks pretty good. I'll take it to class and introduce it and use it for behavior or classroom management or storytelling. And this is going to be our puppet for the year. But think very carefully about what puppet you're going to use. Think about what they're going to look like. Are they going to be an animal like Ellie? Or are they going to be a character from the course book like Mimi? Or are they going to be a human type character? What do you want them to be able to do? So do you want them to be able to move their mouth, for example, if you're going to allow them to speak? And you need to make a decision about whether or not the puppet is going to speak or not speak. So there's a lot of people who will use the puppet as someone who speaks. And you could use Mimi because Mimi talks in the book. So you could have Mimi, and Mimi can do the talking. So, and in that case, I would change the voice. Try not to use your own voice. I think you need to differentiate between you and the puppet. So Mimi would, she could say things like, so Mimi, what is this? This is a cup. Yeah, this kind of thing. So you can change the voice if you're going to use one that speaks, but a lot of people will use one that doesn't speak. And then you can play on the emotional aspect of the puppet as well. So maybe Ellie is the puppet that doesn't say anything. So students need to talk to her and she can agree or disagree, or she can be sad, or she can be shy, these kinds of things. So you might not want to have just one puppet. You might want to have a selection of puppets. Also think about who's allowed to use it. So are you going to have one classroom puppet that's the teacher's and only the teacher is going to be allowed to use it? It's kind of like your tool. Or are you going to have ones that students are going to be allowed to use as well? And you need to kind of plan for that a little bit because you don't want to send mixed messages. If Ellie is just for the teacher and it's going to be used in a particular way, I would stick to that. And then maybe have Leo, who comes in as Ellie's friend and allows you to interact with the students in a different way. So different puppets can have different purposes within your planning. Leo could be the one that is very caring. So Leo is the one that comforts them. Leo is the one that they can go and talk to if they have any problems or they want to understand anything. They could go to Leo. And Ellie could be the one that helps with instruction, this kind of thing. So think a little bit about that. If they're animals, obviously they're very easy for them to interact with, but that's up to you. It's obviously free choice. And also they don't need to be, big puppets like this. I did have some finger puppets, but I couldn't, I think they're in the office. But you can use finger puppets, you can use sock puppets, you can make your own. If you're going to have puppets that students are allowed to use, you could get them to make them themselves. Obviously, there's a lot of value to that. There's motor skills, creativity. They could design them in accordance to what they're doing within the course book, this kind of thing. If you're going to have one that's like a main puppet, like Ellie was, there she is, think about what you're going to do when you're not using Ellie. So rather than just be like, okay, I bring Ellie out and we read a story, she's my storytelling companion. Don't just be like, okay, the story is finished, so now Ellie kind of just like lies on my desk or goes back in my bag. Think about what you're going to do with it when you're not using. Maybe you could make a house for them in a part of the classroom and get children to realize that they are a part of the classroom. Yeah, because realia stuff going on here. She could have a home, and then you can have things like quiet time. Let's not disturb Ellie. Ellie sleeps at this particular time of the day. If you want to use that for quiet time, this kind of stuff. So you can use that as a classroom management and behavioral tool. So these are some of the things around choosing puppets. Let me make sure I didn't forget anything. Make sure I didn't forget anything. Good. Yeah, and I would say don't choose one that's scary. You want them to be friendly. You want them to be, the students to feel like very comfortable interacting with the student, with the puppet. So don't choose one that's like, a scary monster or something like this. Okay, let's move on to thinking about how we can use it. So we just talked there about how to introduce the puppet. I think it needs to be very purposeful, the way you introduce them. There's an activity a little bit further on, another slide, about using an aspect within the book. So within one of the pre-primary books, you have welcoming a friend. So one of the friends could be a puppet. Now, what could be the point where you introduce a puppet into the classroom? So you're tying it in with what you're doing generally within the course book. We've talked a lot about classroom management. You can use puppets to support listening and speaking, of course. You could be modeling pronunciation through the puppet, so they're practicing listening skills. Speaking, they could be speaking to the puppet. They could be speaking as the puppet. So there's lots of scope for listening and speaking. They can support reading and writing as well. We'll see some more of that. But some of these other aspects, and these are the ones we're going to look at for the rest of the session. So you've got CLIL, obviously you can use them to bring in. Obviously you've got animals, so you can bring in all sorts of things. You can bring in science and maths, and you can mirror it to your STEM lessons or whatever. We're going to look at social and emotional learning. We're going to look at global citizenship, thinking skills, and inclusivity, and how we can use puppets to the greatest effect in each of these different areas of learning. And what we'll do is we'll tie the listening and speaking and perhaps the reading and writing into that. Good. Okay, before we do that though, before we move on to each of these sections, I wanted to think about tips. Somebody wrote Pinocchio. Actually, we missed. I had Kermit back there, I think, and we had Elmo as well, didn't we? I didn't bring them up. But I'm trying to think about some tips about some things that might kind of help think about the way that we use puppets. We already talked about this. So creating a world for them. So the puppet isn't just something that you use. The puppet is actually, somebody said it, they're a peer. They're somebody that's a part of the group. They're there with them all the time. They're like an actual member of the class. And to do that, we need to give them a background. So if it was for Ellie, where does she come from? Who are her friends? And you could show them pictures of her friends and then introduce them later. So, her friends are the lion, if we're doing the animals section with vocabulary. And then, later we can introduce the other puppets as well, if we wanted to. But they need a background. They need a name. They need a family. Make them as realistic as possible. And I think that's the next tip. You need to make them real. You need to believe that Ellie is real. Ellie is not just a puppet that I'm using to help me in the classroom. I actually believe that Ellie is real. Ellie is a real elephant. She has feelings. She has a family. She has a background. And all of those things that you see. So each of those topics within their course book, whichever one you're using, family's in there, the environment's in there, home is in there. Give Ellie all of those characteristics, those traits, and get them to know that, get them to feel like Ellie is real, like she's a member of the class, just like everybody else. Yeah, and then you can start to draw on a lot of those social and emotional aspects, I think. Another tip that I would give to teachers is that I would make Ellie, and if you've got different puppets, there could be one that speaks Arabic to them. But I think we need to remember that students know that you speak Arabic. So sometimes interacting with you in English feels weird to them because they're like, well, why would I speak to you in English when I know you understand me in Arabic? And that's much easier for me. It's the path of least resistance to tell you what it is I want to tell you. But if you make your puppet understand English, and this can be really powerful in the way of if the puppet doesn't talk. So if Ellie is, sorry, who was the one that didn't talk? Let's say Leo. Leo's the one that doesn't talk, so they have to communicate with him in English. And students do get that. They understand. And they see, okay, well, I can only communicate with Leo in English. And suddenly their confidence can grow, and they will actually use that vocabulary. They will use those sentence structures to tell Leo what it is they want to tell him. Because if they speak to him in Arabic, he kind of just looks at the teacher like, what? I don't understand. And then the teacher can say, I think you need to tell him this in English. And then they've got the confidence. They've not got to say it to the teacher, again, that dynamic. They've got an alternative outlet to be able to speak, to be able to say what it is that they want. Again, you might want to have one that can speak Arabic. So maybe if you've got 3 or 4 or 5, there could be one that allows them to speak in Arabic. They might want to ask a question in Arabic, so they could ask it to that particular puppet. And then that puppet could mediate between Leo and the student. Okay, I don't know. He could just say in Arabic, I'm not sure the answer to that question. Let's go and ask Leo. Leo only speaks English. Let's try and ask him in English. And then Leo can give them the answer, this kind of thing. Yeah. So use it as a mediation tool there. But try and have one that only understands English. We've mentioned this one already. Think of them like a peer, not like a teaching assistant. And we've talked about making it fun. Make them very animated. So, we don't want Leo to be super boring. Leo's not just like, what's the vocabulary card? It's a cup. What's this one? It's an apple. Yeah, make them fun, make them animated. Students are very used to visual clues now. They interact with a lot of things on the internet. They see a lot of visual. There's so much visual stuff going on in the world. They're used to visual clues. So make them very animated and have a lot of fun with them. We can use them to model. Absolutely. Obviously, that's one of their core purposes, the model language that we want them to be able to use and for students to see that language coming from the puppet. Allow them to, we talked about this one as well, allow them to make their own puppets. If students create their own, and they don't have to be complicated. Again, they could be sock puppets. They could be, the lollipop sticks with the kind of cutouts. They can stick them on, hold them up. If they've got their own puppet, they've got an emotional connection to that puppet. It's not somebody else's puppet, it's mine. And I can use that to explain or say something. And again, if you want them to do speaking activities and they're shy, it's not them saying what it is. It's not them doing the presentation. The puppets can do the presentation. And again, students can interact with each other in that way. So one of them has their lollipop stick with a lion. One of them has their lollipop stick with, a giraffe. And the giraffe and the lion can do the speaking activity together. Yeah, the students control them, the students do the talking, but through the stick puppets. Yeah, so use them, make their own puppets. And again, you can extend that. So if you wanted to do something like a project, you get to the end of a unit, or you get to the end of a series of units, or an end of a semester. Have box theaters. Get them to act it out. You don't necessarily have to see the student. They could do little theater performances. Yeah, and the kids love to do that. If they've made their own puppets, they've come up with their own little scripts, and they can be fun. They don't have to be super serious. Students just like to have fun, and play with it. That play-based learning again. So get them acting out through the puppets. Next tip. They allow you to extend stories. So, you tell a story, and then you can interact with the students and the puppet to extend that story. So, what would have happened if something else, something had changed? If you're thinking about, let's think about the hare and the tortoise. What would have happened if the hare had won? This kind of thing. And you can, interact with the puppet. The puppet can ask questions like, oh, well, what would have happened? Or what was this all about? Or look at the story from the perspective of another character, these kinds of things. And the puppet can help you ask those kinds of questions and get students thinking. Again, they can be used in collaboration types of activities. So again, if you've got more than one puppet, you may have your master puppet, but you may have smaller ones or finger puppets. You could make students like mini teachers. You could put them into 4 groups. Each group has a puppet, and they can collaborate with each other through that puppet. doing certain activities or whatever it is. Put them into groups, get them doing things, get them using the puppet, get them being the puppet. You can use the puppet as a prize. So we've talked about the puppet as a tool to helping students to learn how to behave in class. And so you could use it as a kind of reward or a prize. You can incentivize good behavior or work that they've done. So they could be allowed to look after the puppet, let's say, for the rest of the class. Sometimes teachers, maybe not for their main puppet, but for smaller ones, they might let them take them home for the night and bring them back the next day. These kinds of things. They could come up to the front of the class. So, I invite one of them up. He's been particularly good today. So I'm going to let him be the puppet and lead on something. Let's say we're going to do a song. So, Mustafa, you can come up and lead the song with Leo. So he can come up and, he can be the lion, it gives him the confidence. It's not just him at the front of the class leading the song. He might be enthusiastic, but he's interacting with Leo and he does the song. Other ways you could use it, it could be at the end of the class. The puppet will say goodbye to each student and they can ask them a question. So you stand by the door, with the puppet, and you have a different voice. Let's say you've been doing, you want to recycle or reinforce some of the language points that you've been doing. So, you can say things like the first one comes up, they're in a line, and, as they say goodbye, so goodbye, and then you ask them a question, like an exit ticket, like, how old are you? Or I'm trying to think of things that they might have learned. So think of what you're doing, what you want them to reinforce, and ask different students different questions. So you can differentiate depending on the level of the students. If they're slightly weaker, you might want to ask them something slightly easier. If you want to extend their learning, you can ask them something slightly more difficult. Good. Someone's put something about homework. You might need to elaborate. Don't forget about your, when you're in the class, don't forget about your homework, for example. And I've got a really good tip actually in one of the future slides about using them beyond the classroom. So I'll come back to that point. I'll remember that one as well. And the last tip is to keep it fresh. So keep mixing it up, keep changing things. Don't just use the puppet in one way all the time, same thing. Students will kind of get bored of that. So try and think of new ways to use it. Lots of variety. How can I bring in new puppets? How can I bring in friends? Maybe a puppet will go on holiday and then bring back new information for them or pictures to show them. And again, I'll bring that up in a bit. Okay, so now we're going to go through each of our sections. Each one will take around 5 minutes. And again, I want to make this a little interactional. So for each section, I'm going to ask you first what you think. So how can you use puppets to support classroom management? We've mentioned a whole variety of ways already in the last kind of 20 minutes or so. What other ways can you think to support classroom management using puppets? See what people come up with. Any other ideas or suggestions? Good. Routines, rules, rewards, and feedback. Yep, excellent. I'll give you 30 seconds, the people who are typing. So we've talked about greetings, we've talked about exit tickets, differentiating questions. What else have we got? Routines. You could have one of the puppets that plays the bad cop role. That's always naughty. So that, again, that helps you to reinforce behavioral expectations without it being one of the children that actually has to do it, bringing up that issue for you to be able to address it. So you could address more difficult things before they come up, rather than getting to the second week of class and one of the students does something, you could address that ahead of time through the puppet. Classroom rules, yeah, you can use it for quiet time, motivating students. Yeah, like there's problem solving through the puppets. They could tell jokes. Well, those are stuff here now. Good, cleaning up. Yeah, so, puppet helps to organize cleanups, do's and don'ts. Yep, if the puppet's not allowed to do it, you're not allowed to do it. Yeah, we've got, again, quiet. Lots of people use it for quiet time. People use it for things like counting. Good. Good, excellent. Consequences of rule breaking. Yeah, there's loads of good ideas here. Loads of great stuff. We talked about greetings and routines, and we know that routines are so important in the pre-primary classroom. They've got to understand what's expected of them, how to behave, and that gives them confidence, and it helps them to learn and to achieve more. Like we said, the puppet can greet or say goodbye. They can ask how they are. And I think even really shy students will, feel quite comfortable saying what it is that they want to say to a puppet. They wouldn't say to either a peer or to you. You can use it for reading time. It could be the friendly face, or like I said, one of the puppets could play a kind of bad cop role and be the kind of naughty one, this kind of thing. Yeah, we've got making a play. Loads of great ideas here, so many. Also, we've mentioned a lot of things about participation. So even really shy students can participate, especially if they've made it. Look, and this is an example from Doodletown, I think it was, about, it's there, it's in your course book about making puppets together and using those puppets. But what we want students to develop this intrinsic motivation. So, we want them to engage, but we want it to be on their terms. We need to remember that a lot of things that go on within the classroom are teacher-led, teacher-directed. Teacher wants to achieve this. Yeah, and that's extrinsic motivation most of the time. Yeah, and then we fall into this trap of, is it going to be kind of carrot or stick? Yeah, am I going to kind of ask them to do something and reward them at the end? Or am I going to try to get them to do something with the fear of being punished if they don't do it? So extrinsic motivation often falls in this kind of carrot and stick type of scenario. And we want to move away from that. We want students to be intrinsically motivated with what they're doing. And for us to make it intrinsically motivating, it needs to be meaningful to them. Whatever they're doing needs to have some kind of meaning for them. When it comes to intrinsic motivation, I think it's dependent on several things. For example, mastery. So we like to be good at things. No one likes to be not very good in class or outside, even for adults. We like to be good at things. For example, I like to play golf. Not at the moment because it's 50 degrees, but in the nicer times of the year, I like to play golf. I'm motivated to go and play. And I'm not amazing at it, but you get that intrinsic satisfaction from playing, from it being my choice. And I think that's another thing that is really important in terms of intrinsic motivation, this idea of autonomy, that it's my choice of what I'm doing or how I do it. So for example, let's take the golf example, extend that. If I'm playing and I'm on whatever the third hole, and I'm 150 meters away, it's my choice what club I'm going to play. I've got one chance at it, which is the same in school or in life. If I hit a 7-iron and I drop 20 meters short, at least it was my choice. I weighed it up. I got something wrong. I made that mistake. But then if I got it right, if the 7-iron was the right club to hit and I hit it and it's right next to the hole, that sense of achievement comes from mastery and autonomy. I chose to be here. I chose how to do it. And I'm, getting better at it the more I do. Yeah, this kind of thing. And I think the last thing is purpose. So again, if we're talking about making things meaningful for students, they need to see the purpose behind it. It can't just be, well, this is what the teacher wants me to do, so I'm going to do it. And we've all seen those students. I remember when I was in very young learner classes, you know, you give them a task to do, 50% effort, I'm just doing this well enough so that the teacher ticks it and off I go. Very happy. You're happy, I'm happy. Good job. There's not a lot of purpose to them. So, you know, we need to adapt whatever it is that we're doing. If you're using the coursebook, adapt it. So, you know, in this picture, they've got these sock puppets that are red or gray. You know, give those sock puppets personalities. Yeah. So, you know, if let's say if Iron Man is going to be the vessel by which they use, we're thinking about using rather than learning. But if Iron Man is the vessel by which they use their sock puppet to use the language, then so be it. Let Iron Man be the vessel for them to use that language, I think. Yeah, because it's meaningful for them. They're like, I like Iron Man, and I want to be able to speak through the medium of Iron Man. And again, you need to play that quite carefully because it can get out of control, but add that into your planning, I would say. Now, one question I do have is, can we overuse puppets? Anyone think that we can overuse them? Because this is a question that I guess could come up. And someone's put there, can we use the puppet for 5th graders? I don't think we can overuse them. I think if you're using lots of different puppets in lots of different ways, and each of them is purposeful, I think that there's a lot of scope to use puppets as much as possible. I'd like to see more puppets rather than less in pre-primary and also primary classrooms. I think there's a lot of power that comes through that puppet, a lot of things that you can do with them. So I would probably say that no, you can. I would say that if you're just using one and you're using it in the same way, yeah, somebody's put here, it can get boring and the students can lose interest. And that relates to this idea of the world of the puppet. If the puppet doesn't have a personality, if you don't believe that the puppet is real, then they'll also lose interest as well. Yeah. So, you know, give them meaning, give them personalities, give them a background, give them that world. And then you can branch out and you can bring in puppet friends, you can bring in pictures, you can talk about things that they like to do. All of that English can be absorbed within that world of the puppet. I've got another question for you, which relates to somebody's question there who said about, can we use the puppet for 5th graders? So my next question is, are puppets just suitable for very young learners? Is it just pre-primary classrooms that we should be using puppets in? We've got a pretty clear no. Anyone else? No, we've got some no's, good. Someone says until primary 4, which is interesting because we had somebody asking if you can use them in primary 5, or was it the same person? Let me go back. No, it's a different person actually, okay. I thought so, but in different ways. Personally, I think that puppets can be used with any age, but you need to think about how and where you're going to use them, and also what kind of puppet you're going to use. Obviously, if I bring Leo to a young adults class, doing university entry level, they're probably going to be a bit like, why are you bringing a puppet into class? But think about puppets in the adult world, and there are a lot. So who doesn't love Baby Yoda? Everybody loves Baby Yoda. Adults, how many people? I mean, I think The Mandalorian was one of the most watched shows of 2020. Might have been because we were all on lockdown and everybody upped their Netflix intake. But another one, The Dark Crystal. I don't know if anybody watched this. It was huge on Netflix. And it was a remake of something that came out in the 1980s. And in the 1980s, there was a lot of stuff going on with puppets. If anyone knows kind of Jim Henson stuff that was going on, loads of things to do with puppets. Everybody kind of loved it. And adults would sit down and watch, like you've said here, the Muppet Show. So I think puppets do carry a lot, because puppets aren't just, a ball of fur. They're not just, I'm trying to think of the right word. they're not just inanimate objects that we use to explain grammar points or vocabulary. They actually carry quite strong political messages sometimes. For example, this one in the middle, does anybody recognize this? Because I was doing a bit of research on kind of puppetry in the Mena region, and this one kind of came up. There's this new Netflix show. Yeah, there you go, Habla Fajita. Good. And I think, there's a lot of stuff that's going on within that show, social norms, political, all these kinds of things, and this leads on from things that happened. I don't know if it might be a bit cultural, but we had in the UK something called Spitting Image, which I think has also just recently come out again, because it had Donald Trump and Boris Johnson in it. But this kind of political satire, using the medium of puppets to send messages that you wouldn't be able to do yourself. So I couldn't come on here and say certain things, but you can say them through puppets and people will see them in a different way. So even for adults and for teens as well, there can be a lot of power in, using them to be able to express themselves in ways that they might not be able to do personally. So think about that. And of course, this is all kind of media based, but it's not just media that puppetry is being used in. Puppetry is as old as humanity, probably. I spent some time in Indonesia, and there they use shadow puppetry. And again, this is an activity that you can very easily do with your students. Primary school students would love to do this kind of thing, putting on little plays, using that English through the shadow puppetry. They're behind a screen, no one can see them. So, and I think your fifth grader could do this, put on a shadow puppetry performance using a story that they've made. Again, we've talked a little bit about stories in previous sessions, but get them to create their own stories and then act them out through the shadow puppets. And adults like this as well. So if you go to Indonesia, certainly before things like the internet and electronic devices, these would be a way of bringing communities together. So, at the weekend or when people are not farming or working, they would get together in the evenings and they would put on these shadow puppetry performances. And there's a lot of power in them. That's how we've sent down stories throughout generations. They tell them through the medium of puppetry. So, yeah, I think when it comes to grade 5, primary, even secondary students, it's about how you use them, which types of puppets you use and where you use them. So yes, having Leo in a secondary class, probably not. Setting up shadow puppetry, and they can make these, and it's funny to see. I mean, I don't know how well you can see these pictures, but this is what you would see on the left is the one you would see as the viewer, as the participant. The one on the right is obviously the person controlling the puppets. Now, the audience doesn't see how elaborate those puppets are, but they just see them as shadows. But they do. They make these really elaborate puppets. So yeah, change the intonations, and students can do that. Students will put on funny voices. They can step outside of themselves. They can get in that imaginative. They can get in that play space. Be somebody else. Yeah, and that gives them again that real good vessel to get that language out. It's much more powerful than getting them to stand up in class and say something that you want them to say. So there's a lot of cultural things. Okay, next one. I want to move through a bit quicker. Social and emotional learning. There's some people brought this up already. How can you use puppets to support social and emotional learning? It depends on the type of school. Students do not have the same culture. They don't. But when it comes to things like shadow puppetry, I don't think they necessarily need that. It's about how you sell that activity to them and where they're going to do it. It could be an end of unit thing that they just do to the class. Yeah, they make the puppets throughout the unit as part of a project, and the presentation part of the unit could be done through the medium of shadow puppetry or a box theater type puppetry performance. Yeah, there's lots of scope if you get a bit creative with it, I think. Anyway, social and emotional learning. How can we use puppets to support social and emotional learning? We had some ideas already. Anyone got anything else they'd like to share? I'll give you a moment. Lots of scope for social and emotional learning using puppets. yeah, teaching shy students to open up. I'm sure you guys have lots of ideas. Keep writing them in the chat box. Social and emotional learning. Obviously, these are the kinds of things that we want them to develop, to focus on. Developing healthy identities, managing emotions, and achieving personal and collective goals. The ability to feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain supportive relationships, and make responsible and caring decisions. So, you know, all about me and me within a social group. These are the 5 things within the rings of social and emotional learning. So this is what we want them to be able to learn. And I think we now know that, you know, these things aren't new. It's not like teachers in the 1960s didn't think that students didn't need to manage their emotions. Of course they did. But now we know that we need to make that explicit for students and that they can practice these as skills. You know, and we've now started to really embed these holistically into the course books and the courses that we are delivering to students. So these are the things we want them to achieve. We've had some comments coming in. Yeah, we had the shy, interaction, advice, nice. Yeah, we've got the things about mistakes. Good. Behavior, excellent. So I'm going to look again at an example. So I probably can't see this very well because some of the writing's a bit small, but this is lesson 6 from the course book Mimi's Wheel. I think it might be level 1. I think it is level 1. So we've got the activity, we've got the page spread here, we've got listen, point, and sing. I love my family, and I put the song there. So it's the song is I Love My Family. You've got the CD recording for it. I think it's also on Navio. Color the frame red, and we want them to be using this vocabulary: mummy, daddy, grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, and the phrase I love my mummy. So let's think about how we might use puppetry or puppets to support this particular social and emotional learning lesson, this values-based lesson. It's around family, as we've already mentioned. So if you have some ideas, certainly put them in the chat box. But what we want is we want them to be using this language. Yeah. In the teacher's book, so this is the learning objectives. We've got recognize the value of loving our family. So these are our social and emotional objectives. We've got singing the values song, I love my family. We've got the ability to be able to say in a meaningful way, I love my mummy, for example. Vocabulary, we've already talked, and we've got the key language. Now, if you look at the teacher's book recommends using Mimi for the song, yeah? And I think that's probably true in a lot of teachers' books. But we can go beyond that. We can use the puppet in a lot more ways than just doing that. So someone's put here, my puppet will introduce his family and say all the vocabulary and sing the song. So yeah, so we can use it to introduce the song, we can use it to introduce the vocabulary. Our aim in the lesson is to get that students to produce that language and understand and produce it in a meaningful way. So we could have Mimi's family as stick puppets. We mentioned this before. Each of those 6 members, let's go back a slide. So each of these 6 people could be, you can find them and you can cut them out and they can be stuck onto lollipop sticks. You could have it where each student has all 6 characters. Oops, I've gone back too far. So each student has all 6, and perhaps Mimi will say, I love my mummy, and you're doing comprehension. So they have to listen and they will hold up the mum. And then you can, okay, Mimi, who do you love now? I love my grandpa. Yeah, and then they've got to look and they hold up the stick with the grandpa on. Now you could do that individually, but you could also do that in pairs or threes or small groups. And then each group has all 6, so they could sit in perhaps a circle of 3 with the 6 characters in front of them, and they have to negotiate which one they're going to hold up because they may disagree, yeah, if they're doing listening and comprehension. So Mimi's going to tell you who she loves. So I love daddy. And then the 3 students have to, between them, choose which one is the daddy. They need to agree on which one they're going to hold up, and the group will hold up. And that group could get a point. You could make a game out of it, yeah. You could also flip it So you could have, if you don't want to have all of those lollipop sticks, you could just have the 6 characters, and you and Mimi. I should be using Mimi, really. Let's change. You and Mimi are in the class. Mimi will hold up one of the sticks. She doesn't say anything, and students can practice saying which one is that she's held up. So you can do it either way. You can flip it around. So this, again, we were talking before about reinforcing listening and speaking. Yeah, or who is she? There's lots of things. You can do lots of different types of questions and mix it up. And again, you can differentiate there. If it was holding up the, she holds up the brother. A student may not be ready to say, I love my brother. You might want to start the sentence for them. So if they're slightly weaker, you say, I love my, and then you hold up and they have to just say brother. And then for perhaps a stronger student, you can hold it up and they could say the whole sentence. Yeah, you can differentiate between different types of students and what you want them to do. You can mediate that and choose that as well. I thought I had to throw this one in there because somebody did mention it. For very shy students, puppets can really allow students who are very shy. This is a project that I worked on in Malaysia, and we introduced the puppets. In Malaysia, these were very rural schools. They didn't have any technology. They had very large classes, kind of 50 children sometimes. And there was a lot of kind of very traditional teaching methods, teach from the book, off the blackboard, whole class, very kind of controlled environments. So there wasn't a lot of kind of communication, a lot of interaction. So we used puppets as a way to get the students to interact with some of the language and make it more communicative. And they had to do different things. And again, we were talking before about introducing the puppet, and we were doing this through, this was a turtle, and her head obviously went in, which was really nice. So she was very shy. Different students had to come up and ask her different types of questions to kind of entice Shelley to become more confident in the classroom. And we did a whole project that ran over a few days around that. But yeah, a really great tool for helping shyer students. So social and emotional learning, we want students to be able to express themselves, and we need them to develop relationships between each other. I put that picture there because I had Ellie. We were talking about Ellie's family. And again, if Ellie is with us, then she's obviously not with her mom. So if we're doing this, I love my mommy, how does Ellie feel? Because her mom is not here. Maybe she feels sad, and these kinds of things. And if students have that anxiety going into pre-primary settings or the first year of school, again, we can break some of these things down and relate to them a little bit and understand how they feel, which is really good. It can also help us to build a connection between kind of conceptual things. If we're just teaching from the book, it's kind of just words on page. If you're using kind of Navio, they might be watching the song or the language presented on an interactive whiteboard. But we want also to bring that into kind of the reality space as well. So we were talking about modeling, and you're bringing the language off the page, you're bringing it out of the screen, and you're allowing them to see it. Yeah, Ellie is real, so I'm able to use it, and Ellie only speaks English, so I'm able to use English with somebody in a real way, because obviously our students don't have, might not, I don't know where you are, but they might not have that access to native speaking English people. I shouldn't say native speaking, but students with higher level language English. So they don't have that interaction yet. It would be nice to be able to bring a group of fluent children into your classroom, but that's obviously not possible. And Ellie can play that role. Yeah. So we've discussed, we need to model it, we need to make social and emotional learning explicit to students, and we need to practice it. So we need to keep doing it, reinforcing it. And obviously each unit, Ellie can come back, she can recycle old language, she can keep talking about things to do with behavior or how feelings, these kinds of things. Yeah. Look for lots of opportunities. Okay, global citizenship. We're almost towards the end. How can you use puppets to support global citizenship? This is another big topic at the moment. In the interest of time, I will let you guys write as much as you want in the chat box, and I will keep following it, but I'll move on because we've got 15 minutes. And I want to make sure you guys have time for some questions. So there's lots of ways that we can use puppets for kind of global citizenship style activities. So I worked again on a different project in Malaysia. And in this project, I was working with 60 schools, and 20 of those schools were not, so it was in Malaysian Borneo, so it wasn't on the mainland. It was kind of like way over to the east. And a lot of those schools were very remote, very rural. And 20 of those schools were actually like not on the main island. They were smaller islands. Some of them were very small islands, very small communities. I'd say some of them would probably fit inside some of the malls here that we have in Dubai. But they were small, predominantly fishing types of communities. Some of the children actually didn't live on an island at all. There were actually some of the Bajau Laut, which is the communities that live entirely on the water. So some of the children had kind of never even been on dry land. So we did a project there with WWF, so the World Wildlife Fund. Now, one of the great things I think about global citizenship is obviously it's about realizing our place within the kind of wider world. That's what we want students to understand. So WWF's remit was to obviously advocate for environmental issues, sustainability, in these areas where, you know, they were being kind of overfished. There was a lot of dynamite fishing, cyanide fishing, encroachment into marine parks from, you know, international organizations, this kind of thing. And we had the remit of improving English, and improving English teaching standards across Malaysia. Separately, as two separate organizations, very difficult to achieve our objectives. But by coming together, we could actually achieve both at the same time. They had a lot of the materials, they had a lot of the access to the islands, and we had obviously access to the schools, we had access to the children, and we had some of the other English language materials as well. So we kind of came together, and we devised it through a kind of puppetry project. So the idea was to advocate to, you know, the children on these islands that they're custodians of their, you know, these very kind of rich ecosystems and environments, how to protect the turtle populations, how to protect reefs, how to reintroduce artificial reefs, this kind of thing. And we decided that we would do a lot of this thing through the medium of puppetry. So I think there's a lot of power in the way that you can use puppets in this type of, and you can see that engagement with the kids. Yeah, so they're engaging with the puppets, they're engaging with the topics, they're engaging with the stories, but without, you know, adults kind of telling them what to do. Probably thinking to yourselves, how does this relate? I'm kind of talked a bit too much there, but how does this relate to you guys? Again, we've talked about, you know, building upon your community, drawing on the resources that you can. So, you know, you may have an end of semester puppet show and you invite parents or carers to be a part of that, or a group of teachers could get together and bring their classes together to do a performance. And you can make it interactive. You could have, you know, whatever, a guest appearance. The principal could come in. You can have dress up, you know, and students can, you know, make it very interactive, especially if parents are involved and you make it very interactive and you plan for that. They'll see their children enjoying, interacting with, using the language, you know, and they love that they love to see that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of power in this kind of like building platforms, connecting with your kind of wider resource base, whether that's parents, whether that's other teachers, and you can use puppets for a lot of that stuff, I think. There's other things you can do. We obviously want students to understand their place within the world. So one of the things we're going to be doing in the academy is a project called Where's Mimi and Friends? So we've got Mimi, and hopefully some of you have Mimi, but if you don't, you'll have some of her friends maybe. And, you know, they don't need to be any puppet. They could be a finger puppet that's one of the friends. That's absolutely fine. But what we want is for students to be able to see. So I mentioned before that, you know, Mimi is in class. Mimi does a couple of weeks with you in class. You do different types of things with her. Mimi goes on holiday. Mimi's allowed holidays just like everybody else. And Mimi can then, you know, show pictures. So, and if we all work together, there's lots of different teachers here. Some of you are in Jordan, some of you are in Qatar, some of you are in Morocco. If we all share pictures in one particular group, we can all access that. So, where's Mimi been? Mimi's been to Egypt. I took a picture of this picture when I went to Egypt last time. Yeah, and we can build up that collection. So I'm going to be posting something on the Academy Instagram page, and I'll put it in highlights so that anybody can access it all the time. Next time I go, at the moment, we're not traveling so much, but when we do, if you don't have a Mimi, maybe we can get you one. I've got everybody's contact details, so maybe when we follow up, we can see if we have any Mimis that can be sent out to people. But if we can build up this collection, I wanted to call it Mimi and Friends, because I know that people don't always have, you might be using Doodle Town, for example. If you're using Tiger Time and you're in primary, you could use the Tiger if you've got the Tiger. Yeah, and we can build up this collection. Yeah, one of Mimi's friends has been on holiday, Ellie the elephant, and here's a picture of her. She is in the new National Museum in Qatar. Yeah, and you can have a picture of her there, and we can all share those things. Again, that's us building a community of content that we can all access. So that's just another idea, and you guys can do something similar in your own classrooms. Maybe if one of your colleagues is going on a trip somewhere, they have a small puppet, they can take a picture of themselves. These kinds of things are nice ideas. Thinking skills. If anyone can think of anything to support thinking skills, we're kind of coming towards the end. And again, there's lots of things within the coursebook. So again, this is Doodle Town. So, each unit starts with a kind of think and doodle in Doodle Town, which is really nice. And you can use the puppet to talk about some of these things. I'm actually going to skip one of the slides that's coming up, which is about how we can use it in an online way. How do we use the puppets outside of the classroom? So if you want them to think about this, say they're going to come to class, it's Sunday, we're going to start to do this unit. We want to get them thinking about the weather, what the weather's like, and I want them to do their think and doodle today. What I might want to do is I might want to send them the vocabulary ahead of time. Yeah, even with kind of pre-primary, you can kind of flip that classroom. You might just want to be 4 pieces of vocabulary. It might be sunny, rainy, foggy, and stormy. But instead of you being like, oh, okay, well, I want them to know this vocabulary ahead of the lesson, you could have maybe a WhatsApp group with the parents, and Ellie holds the vocabulary card. So it's not you, you're not in the picture. Okay, get out, this is too far away. But you could send them 4 pictures with Ellie holding the vocabulary with a picture and the word or whatever. Yeah. So you can use the puppet as another medium of sending information. And they could, if you get into the habit of doing that, they could get into the habit of looking forward to, on Thursday, on the school's WhatsApp group, Ellie sends us a picture of something. Yeah. It could be a piece of vocabulary. It could be whatever you want them to be focusing on ahead of the class. Then when they come, they know their 4 pieces of vocabulary. We can do our think and doodle. Yeah. And again, we can start to intersect between all the different aspects that we want them to be doing with all of these kind of global skills and soft skills. So bringing critical thinking and global citizenship education and even social and emotional learning together. Yeah, and the puppet can draw out their ideas, it can draw out their feelings. So you're not just saying people need water, water is wonderful, animals need water, how do you use water? But you can do that again through the medium of the puppet. If the puppet does live with you in the classroom and they have a home, has Ellie had a drink of water today? Ellie has not had any water today. You could have a reusable water bottle that's just for Ellie that lives with her in her little house, and it can be empty. It doesn't have to have water in it because these are young kids, and you could use it as a reward. So okay, you've been good. You can give Ellie her water at the start of class. Yeah, and they can pretend they love to play. They give Ellie her drink. Good. Let's put the reusable water bottle back in Ali's house, ready for tomorrow. All of these types of things, yeah, gets them to really see. And it brings all of those aspects in a more realistic way, I think. Ellie has not had anything to drink today. How's she feeling? She's feeling thirsty. She's looking a bit sad. Yeah, maybe we should give her some water. What do you guys think? Should we give her some water? And then you could bring the thing and give her some water, this kind of thing. Yeah. Lots of opportunities, I think, there. And the last one, a few minutes to spare, advancing inclusivity. How can we advance inclusivity through the use of puppets? And I think there's lots of them. Again, you can write, and I'm worried about time. So if you want to write something in the chat box, please feel free. When it comes to inclusivity, obviously we want to promote more inclusive environments all the time. So we want our environments to be welcoming, sharing, we want to respect others, and the puppet gives us a lot of scope to be able to focus on those things. Again, we can tie it to the course books that we're using. This again is Mimi's Wheel, and this is lesson 3, and it's a story about a new arrival. So, and I was mentioning at the very beginning about introducing the puppet. Puppet can definitely come in here. We've modeled, introduced, or welcoming a new arrival into our school, which was the puppet. I've used that language. Now, when they see it in the context of the story, it makes a little bit more sense, yeah, rather than doing the story first. Yeah, you've made that language real to them, and then they go, okay, well, I've seen that language in real life because we welcomed Ellie and we used those words. Now we're seeing it in the story, and I've got 2 mediums through which I've seen and used that language. An extension to that, we can also think very carefully, and when I spoke before about choosing your puppets, think about portrayal, think about representation, think about the messages that you want to send to your students. Again, you can do that through puppets. You could have a puppet that's, I'm trying to think of a good example. I can't think of the one off the top of my head, but I'm sure you can think of ways to bring up topics that you want to discuss around inclusion with your students through the medium. And again, not waiting for a student to come. I mentioned this in the inclusion session that we did before, which was that you shouldn't wait. So let's say, for example, a deaf student. Don't wait for a student who is deaf to come into your school to make the changes. See the adaptation of what you do as something that will benefit all students. And then if you do get a hard of hearing student come to your school, they will automatically feel more comfortable. So you could have one of the puppets that is hard of hearing or cannot see, something like this. And again, you need to think very carefully about how you do that, how you plan for that. But there's definitely scope for it if you're into it, if you're brave enough. And I talked about this one before, so using it online. Again, if anybody's got any ideas about how you've used puppets in an online learning environment, please do share them. We're going to run out of time, so I will maybe I will write some stuff up and put it on the Facebook group as a summary. Last thing is some questions, I think. So there's been a lot. We've done an hour and 28 minutes, and I've talked a lot. There's been lots of questions and loads of ideas. People have been writing away in the chat box there. Struggled to keep up a little bit. Puppets, have changed your mind? Are you going to use them more? The next slide is a question and answer. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. There's a few coming through. In what ways do you think you could use puppets in a different way this year than you used them last year? Yeah, I'm glad somebody's interested in using them online, and I'd really like to hear about your experiences about doing that, because I've used puppets in a lot of face-to-face projects, but I've never used them in an online capacity. So I don't really have that experience. So it'd be really interesting to see how you guys actually do that. Yeah, definitely use them with your 5th graders, but think very carefully about how you're going to do that. There was a couple of questions. Can the use of a puppet help students develop self-confidence? Yes, absolutely. It's all tied into that social and emotional development. Use the puppet to help draw that confidence out of them. I think there's lots and lots of opportunities for that. I'll also post some links, perhaps to some articles. I think there might be an article on One Stop English around using puppets. Going to use for 10 minutes? Yeah, longer people are going to use it for classroom management. There was another question. If the puppet is popular, will it give results more than puppets which you designed? You mean if you buy them or if you design them yourself. Trying to get this question, if the puppet is popular. I think either way, I think that you can get, I think that there's a lot of studies and there's a lot of research that puppets lead to greater outcomes from students. I don't think I've seen any that have said the puppet had little to no impact on the students. They pretty much all said that much more engagement, a lot more communication, a lot more interaction, and students' outcomes as a result of that have been much higher. I think in one study, it was almost 80% of people said that most of their students did much better with language learning than if they hadn't used the puppet. So let me see. Yeah, bio design. I don't think it matters. I don't think the kids really care if you've bought or designed your own puppet. I think if you design a puppet, it can be more personalized. You can design it the way that you want. And also you could, if you're designing it, you could bring the students into that process, get them to help you design it, get them to design their own, get them to make their own. Should we use Puppet on every lesson or is it too much? I think for every lesson, it might be a bit too much. But if you use them in different ways or you use different puppets for different lessons, you probably could. I think you just need to be a bit careful you don't extend too far with just one puppet. Where can you get Mimi in Egypt? I'm sure you can get Mimi in Egypt. If you're using Mimi's Wheel as a course in your school, get in touch with the educational consultant responsible for that school, and they should be able to get you Mimis that you should already have them rooted. Yeah, that is what we mean. Okay, anyone else have any other questions? Please feel free to type them. You can also contact me. My email is at the bottom. And the last slide that I have, basically my email is my first name, last name, nathan.waller@macmillaneducation.com. But you can also get in touch with us through our new Mena PD Academy website. Very easy, menapdacademy.com, super simple to remember. On there, we've got the back to school schedule because we've got tons more webinars and another workshop coming up. There's also our modules. There's 2 self-study modules, one around using stories in the Young Learner classroom. So you might want to look at that. And there's also 2 live modules, which registration is open for, which you can register. And one is using projects. So again, puppets will probably be a part of that. It's really practical stuff, how to use the course books to develop projects. And again, a lot more about engagement, interaction, getting students using that language as much as possible. If you just want to drop in on us in kind of small doses, we have these kind of 15 to 20 minute ELT time podcasts, which are happening on Mondays. And again, if you go onto the website and look at the ELT time section, you can register for them as well. I didn't see if anybody else put any questions. Let me just check. Nope, perfect. You are all very much welcome. I'm glad that it was informative. I hope that it was packed full of kind of practical things, ideas. Be confident, experiment, try things. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. Maybe you're bringing a puppet and they'll hate it. That's okay as well. He could be the bad guy and he just sits in the corner. And if you're not well behaved, you go and spend some time with whatever it is, Naughty Nathan, the snake puppet or whatever. Lots of scope. Be adaptable. Practice, get used to it, use different voices, make them animated. It's not always easy, but I think the more you do it, the more you get used to it. Okay, that's all from me today. And from the Mena PD Academy team, we thank you very much. We will be back on the 2nd. No, we'll be back on Monday with the ELT Time podcast, and we'll be back on the 2nd of September with primary around engagement. So some of this stuff will overlap, I think. Thanks very much, guys, and all the best to you and your students. For the topic for ELT time is sustainability, actually, in education. So we've got Ola Goma, who's working on a UNESCO-funded project, joining us for 15 minutes for a cup of tea. This one is empty now, so I will look forward to Monday. It's on Monday afternoon. I think it's 4:30 6:30 p.m. Dubai time. It's free. Everything is free. The modules are free. The back to school activities are free. The podcast is free. Everything we have, there's no cost to. It's all to support teachers in Mena. Thanks, guys, and we will see you again very soon. Enjoy the day, and we wish you and your students all the very best for back to school.